Greetings. Welcome to the world premiere of the project we've been working on for how many months? Many months. So I would like to give you a brief overview of what I have planned for the next hour. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Nate Hagens. I'm the Director of Energy and Our Future, and we made this animation. The plan is a brief introduction. I'm going to go through the reasons why we made this movie, our hopes and plans for the future. I'm going to introduce the team that was involved in its creation. We're going to show a few short clips from each of the four acts of the movie. I'm going to talk about how this sets into the work of our organization in helping navigate the great simplification. And when we're done with all that, my colleague Kyle Saunders will MC a Q&A from all of you. And I'm about to introduce everyone, and he'll tell you what to do about that. Looking at the names in the list, it's like my inner circle has joined this Zoom call, which is heartwarming. So we just made this movie. Let me introduce the team. Justin Ritchie is a longtime colleague of mine. He just finished his PhD in climate and energy at UBC in Vancouver, but he also has a side gig of producing music and videos and podcasts. Justin, say hello. You're off camera at the moment, but
hello, everyone.
Justin runs an organization called Jumbo, and the illustrator and animator and artist of this entire project works at Jumbo, one Elliott Wilkes, who kind of tripped me from wanting to do 2 3-minute trailers. He was so talented and artistic that we decided to spend a lot more time on making something larger. Elliott, say hello.
Hey everyone, thank you for joining us tonight.
And then my former student, Lizzie Siriani, who as of June 1st will be a full-time member of our team here at Energy and Our Future. And she was the brutal editor and utility infielder who helped me navigate the multiple edits and other problems with the script. Lizzie?
Hi.
And Kyle Saunders, longtime colleague, founder of the Oil Drum. Kyle and many other people who can't be on the call were very instrumental with the script and advice on this. Kyle?
Pleasure to see all of you.
Kyle, did you want to give any instructions?
Yes, please. And also, just when we do get to the Q&A section, which will be in about a half an hour, be sure to hit the Q&A button down at the bottom of the screen there if you'd like to submit a question, and we will go from there.
Thank you. One person who was integral to the success of this, but had plans tonight, is my program manager of Energy and Our Future, Leslie Bat-Lutz. And there is no way this project would have happened without her forcing us all to meet the deadlines. She was at the end of the day, Nate, no more changes. This is done. Otherwise, it would have been going on forever. So let me tell you a little bit about the genesis of this film. So our organization has kind of 4 audiences. It's how I like to think about it. There's the advanced policy for politicians and leaders who are going to have to make important changes in the future that are currently not publicly or politically acceptable. So we have to educate what might be needed that society would not accept at the moment. There are students. I used to teach a class at the University of Minnesota called Reality 101, and we're now working on a 10-hour video version of that for anyone in the world to take for free to understand how our system fits together and also give some avenues for personal and career involvement in what we face. There are community leaders who are kind of accessing this and then trying to build social capital and networks in communities. And then there's the scout team, which is you all on this call, the people that feel the truth of this and feel the urgency and the preciousness of time and want to play a role in this. And so I decided last year, actually, Kyle Saunders on this call was someone who was pushing me in this direction to speak to that fourth demographic. And what we wanted to do was create a podcast. And so, because of my network of people, we just thought it would be easy to be able to grow a following that understood what's happening in the great simplification. And so, what we said was, let's make a couple of 2-minute teasers for the podcast, 2-minute animations. I talked to Justin. He's like, yeah, we can do that at Jumbo. We'll do a couple of 2-minute teasers. Well, we started writing the script, and any of you on this call who know me, brevity is not my ace in the hole, as it were. So the script kept getting longer and longer and longer. And I'm like, wow, this is not going to fit into 2 minutes. And we didn't really have the whole script done when we finished the first video, Energy Blind. And I almost thought that was going to be it, energy blind. I mean, that is kind of important to tell our society because we think about money and technology. And since energy has been so cheap and so abundant during our lifetimes, we've never realized how important it is. But then we ended up expanding the script so that it ended up being, I'm sure, Justin and Elliott, you know this better than me, but it was like 160 scenes. And I am not kidding. It was like 75 versions of the script that it was honed and sculpted like a samurai sword. Many, many different takes on the voiceover. I had to get a voice coaching because I sounded like monotonous, blah, 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 blah. And I still don't really like some of the voice, but you know, this was never intended for the general public. This was just intended as a framework for people listening to the podcast. But I am so pleased. Seriously, I think Justin's team, especially Elliott, was just kind of a diamond in the rough. I didn't envision that the images would not only convey the scientific concept of what I had in mind, but in many cases did it in such an artistic way. I've watched this thing 40 times and sometimes I still get goosebumps. And we're going to show a few of my favorite clips. But even on like some of the stuff Elliott came up with himself, it's not what I had in mind. Most of the stuff I was pretty anal about, like my garage and my house and my car are a frickin' disaster. But I am a little bit of a stickler for details on this stuff. And I'm sure my team was a little fed up with my little, got to switch this. But I'm pretty happy with the final result. And in some cases, I almost think like the plume of energy coming out of the ground in the first video, that was exactly what I asked Elliott to do. But what he did that I didn't anticipate is there's almost a religious nature to it, that humans are looking at this power source and we've organized our entire world, our entire society, our entire expectations around this plume that is going to be depleting. And it was almost this spiritual, like, this is what we're worshiping. And I never intended for that, and maybe Elliott, you didn't either, but that kind of came through. And there's a bunch of those things that are kind of magical. So I'm very happy with it. I had no idea how much work goes into these things. I was like, oh yeah, well, what we do, we write a script, we give it to Justin's team. He's got some animators, and then in a month we'll be done. No, that's not how it worked. We had bi-weekly meetings. Leslie had just spreadsheets on all kinds of things, that this scene and this music and this inflection. It was a lot of work. I really hope this gets widely shared. I think it may be a little too dark for high school and college students, yet the world is rapidly converging on this story. So I might be wrong about that. I think we have a huge amount of resources and references that will back up the story that was told here. And I think it's appropriate. I think if this would have been more hopeful, it would have been dishonest. And if it would have been darker, and if I had any conflict with Elliott, it's that his natural artistic tendency is a little more goth than mine is. But we navigated that pretty well. And I think to be joyful is also inappropriate for the times that we face. So I think this was a good balance of scientific synthesis, context, framework for the work that we all have to do in coming decades, and some realistic hope. So I love it. I'm proud of it. Now we got to move on to the next thing, but we're pausing at least tonight to have everyone on the team, especially Elliott Wilkes, take a bow for a lot of hard work. And with that, why don't I hand it over to the team to say a few words of their experience or thoughts or anything you'd like to say. Who would like to start? Justin?
Sure. Yeah, I'll just say a few things. And I mean, I remember when I first met you in person, Nate, in Vermont at an ecological economics conference, and I just knew that someday you were going to have a podcast, because not only did you have a great voice, but you also had a story to tell that just needed a little bit of assistance, a leg up, maybe some encouragement from people like Kyle to reach out to folks. And at that time, I was in the process of working a lot of podcast projects myself. And so I just kind of had that eye where I was like, yes, Nate's got it, and he's going to run with it. And it took a while, but he's finally got it going. So I'm super proud of that. And so then it was really in mid 2020 that he reached out to me and started talking about just telling this story, not only in a podcast format, but in a video series of taking his work and the work that he's done with his Reality 101 course that he taught at university, inspires so many interesting students to learn about these topics. And how do we translate that to video? And so we got to work in the middle of last year, really translating that to storyboards. And as Nate was saying at the top of the webinar of the session, it just went, it went from let's do maybe 2-minute video or maybe a few 2-minute videos. And then now we've got our own mini documentary here. And, I'm just super impressed at Nate and the ISOF team of pulling it together and having that kind of rigorous discipline to end the storyboards when they needed to end and pull all the pieces together. And I'm just super proud of Elliott and the rest of the Jumbo team on all the work they did visually to make it work so good. I've been familiar with a lot of these concepts for many years. And I stand by just that this is the best visual storytelling that's ever been done in this space. And so I hope a lot of people can watch it and really resonates with them, and it has some legs. So I'll turn it over to Elliott now.
Thanks, Justin. Yeah, it's definitely started off being a pretty small project, turned into a very, very big one. And I'm so thankful for it because, I just, not only did I sort of progress myself sort of artistically and creatively, but I think I actually learned a lot along the way, because this stuff is pretty much drilled in my brain every day for a lot of months. And it sort of subconsciously sort of clicked with me. And, when I have friends and things ask me what are you working on? I feel with your design skills these days, it's so hard for me to explain what this project was. So I'm really happy now that we have something that, I can show them why I've been inside doing all this stuff for so long. So yeah, I'm glad it's done. It's been a pleasure.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Elliott. Elliott, did you have any personal favorite scenes? I've never asked you that. I just wonder.
I think this scene that's playing right now is actually one of my favorites.
Well, we had 9 takes on that one. We eventually nailed it. That was hard.
the energy in itself was like really hard to come up with. It took a while to sort of get it right. And then once we had it right, it was a pretty good feeling. Just kind of that iridescent, purpley type shimmering thing. Just trying to represent energy is a tough thing to do. But I think we landed on a pretty good sort of concept.
Yeah. Excellent. Thank you so much. Elizabeth, would you like to say a few words?
Sure. I mean, I started learning this story at the beginning of my college experience when I took Nate's class at the University of Minnesota. And I have since graduated, but this story has kind of become like a central focus of what I've learned and also the work I've been doing for the past year. So getting to see this story come together in such a creative and frankly beautiful way, it was really exciting. And I just kind of think back to when I took that course and like, if this had been there when I was first learning that would be amazing, because while reading lots and lots of journal articles and Nate's writing, it's fun. Seeing something so illustrative and metaphorical really helps process the story. So,
thank you. And Lizzie is a much more concise writer than I am. And so the script, this is only 32 minutes. Without Lizzie, it would have been 47 minutes.
Higher, Bob.
I think college classes could use this video, but it would require the college teacher to understand these things enough to facilitate the discussion, I think. And there are some that are already using it. There's a high school class in Minnesota that's using this material already. So I'm encouraged about that. Kyle, would you like to say anything or?
No, first off, I'd want to remind everyone on the call to do feel free to, if you do have some questions on either on the substance of the video or questions for Nate on other things, do throw them into the Q&A. I've had a few questions shot to me in the back channel, so I've got some ready, but there's nothing in the queue right now. So if you do have a question for Nate, do throw it in there. It's been interesting watching this evolve as a project and also just watching Nate grow in this space with regard to how willing he is to put all of his life energy into this. And that came through in the multiple iterations that I have seen and the scripts that I have seen and the work that all of you have done also on this call. It is a massive effort, and I hope that everyone understands that it does take a toll when you invest yourself into something so much. And I know that Nate's Hart, been working with him for over 15 years now, and I've unfortunately known from the beginning that how good of a guy he is. And it's just great to see all of these manifestations of your work. So keep it up.
Thanks, brother. I couldn't do this work without dogs. So this is Frank.
Amen.
My former students know.
Here comes
Frank.
mine.
Okay. So Justin, are we ready to share clips? We just chose like a 30-second, 45-second clip from each of the four movies. And Justin, are you ready to share those? This is a clip from the end of the first video. Ancestors, the benefits from carbon energy would have appeared indistinguishable from magic. And instead of appreciating this giant one-time windfall, we developed stories that our newfound wealth and progress had emerged purely from human ingenuity. We had become energy blind. That's still one of my favorite sequences. We went over that a bunch of times. Right in that 30 seconds is the core fundamental flaw in macroeconomic theory, where we truly allocate all of our wealth and productivity as a function of our capital and our labor. But as economist Steve Keen says, labor without energy is a corpse, and capital and technology without energy is a sculpture. And so this fundamental aspect of our reality is we just don't recognize energy. And I thought the way that our team came up with that, and then Elliott eventually landed it visually with the Aladdin's lamp to signify magic. Really, fossil carbon and hydrocarbon is indistinguishable magic on human timescales. And then we had the books with the technology and the brain and the cleverness, and the energy blind just landed with the music. And I still really love that part. So that, unfortunately, when we saw that, we're like, oh God, now we got to really nail the rest of the script, because this one was really good. Does anyone else want to say anything on that?
No, yeah, I agree. That's one of my favorite scenes as well.
Yeah.
We have with that eye at the end.
Yeah. Cool. Well, let's just move right on then. Justin, would you like to show the scene in the second act?
Economic stories assert that with more money, we can create more of anything. The truth is, we cannot create energy. We both extract it and burn it faster by using technology and printing money. Natural capital, particularly energy, is the true foundation of our monetary systems. As we create more money, we don't create more resources. We merely access them faster.
So that was when I started thinking about the second video, how energy, technology, money, and the environment relate to growth. That was like the first visualization I had, is we want to show a dollar bill where everyone thinks it's just a dollar bill. But then when we open it up, we see that it's supported by the fossil plume. And of course, I'm not making the claim that money is energy or that energy is money. There's lots of things that the productivity of our society, technology and innovation, materials are vitally important. But the whole thing, when we pile up these financial claims, which is exactly what's going on now in the world, we are doubling our debt every 8.5 years. And we're doubling our GDP, which is the income stream that is required to service and maintain the debt, every 25 years. That right there is a huge mathematical reality problem. But that's even when energy is still increasing. Once energy starts to decrease, and arguably peak oil was November of 2018, that divergence between financial representations of reality and our underlying physical reality is going to widen until it recalibrates. So I thought that, like, suspenseful kind of release of the unexpected reward is, oh my God, like, what is money anyways? Money is a financial marker that represents the things that we really value: natural capital, social capital, human capital, built capital. But energy is required for all that stuff. So I'm hopeful that will at least make people think about that.
And environmental challenges stem from a mismatch of hunter-gatherer minds inhabiting a competitive consumer growth culture. Together, these human universals have led to incentives and behaviors which have created a metabolic superorganism whose objective is disconnected from the well-being of its parts, us.
We are walking around in a modern, novel, super materially rich culture with neural scaffolding that is very similar to our ancestors 20,000 years ago, and still quite similar to our ancestors from 200,000 or 300,000 years ago. And we're trying to get our same neurotransmitter cocktails and the same emotional states of our ancestors in a totally novel environment. And so the things we do aren't the real objective, but they're the ultimate objective is just to match the same feelings our ancestors got. I think that little scene makes that clear. The other thing that it makes it clear, or at least gives rise to, is that we aren't bad people. Like right now, we've got climate and we've got biodiversity and we have poverty and all kinds of crazy things going on. It's not because the humans alive today are bad or worse than they were 100 years ago or 10,000 years ago. It's A, that there's more of us, and B, it's the economic system that we're a part of. And the superorganism dynamic doesn't care about the constituent parts. So we're going through these motions of this system that's imposing downward causation on our behaviors. So I thought the little Tristans coming out from the cloud, and I never asked you to do that, Elliott. That was brilliant, where you kind of merged the human into the superorganism shape. I thought that was really cool. So yeah, I mean, video 3 was so challenging, and they did by far the best they could have with that. The challenge was set when I wrote the script, because there were 8 or 9 aspects of human behavior that I thought were relevant to our societal challenges. So each one was like 15, 20 seconds. And then then I stopped and did another, steep discount rates and social reinforcement and optimal foraging. And it was like, eventually we put a little pause in between them to make the viewer, okay, now there's a new topic coming. But I put a crap load of content into that 8-minute clip. And that's the problem with this entire video, is it's too much information to readily convey in a half hour. And yet we have to be able to try to do that. Lizzie took my class. That was 150 hours of stuff that she had to sit through. I would love there to be a 3-minute version of all this, but in 3 minutes or 5 minutes or 30 minutes, you can only give a microcosm of a hologram of the larger picture. So as far as hitting the highlights of why human behavior is central to our predicament, I thought video 3 did a good job.
A technology lens promises a shiny road of comfort, novelty, and prosperity, enabled by future inventions. Innovation, artificial intelligence, and a vibrant metaverse will sidestep any energy or resource constraints. We envision future humans breaking free from the confines of Earth and enjoying high-tech lifestyles where the biggest problem is runaway robots. These lenses are all optimistic but misguided. All these lenses are energy blind. The real paths ahead can only be seen by integrating energy awareness with biology, sociology, physics, and everything science has discovered. We need a systems lens to read the map.
The thinking wasn't just to go and describe what the great simplification is likely or possibly to be, but really to describe why other demographics and groups in our culture are going to ignore and deny this stuff. And the big ones are economists and financial people and technologists. This one, in case you're wondering, Elliott did a couple drawings for me on last year's Earth Day talk, where I said we're headed for a Mordor economy eventually. Unless we change our cultural objectives, we're going to spend more and more energy on extracting the energy and more energy on mitigation, like sucking CO2 machines and other waste removal. So I just kind of half jokingly said, at some point in the future, half of our energy will be getting energy and the other half will be cleaning up our waste. So he drew a space shuttle sort of thing with a vacuum cleaner. And that's what's going on here. Those things are sucking waste from the towers. And Elliott, I never told you this, but I love the little the spaceship that kind of zooms in front of the camera. You just like threw that in there. You did a bunch of that stuff, and there you got it right there. Like, whoa, what's that? So, economists, any macroeconomist watching this video is just going to not even finish it, because this is counter to a lot of the things that not only they believe, but their status and their careers are attached to. Justin cautioned me on the saying stock markets at all-time highs portend a rich and virtuous future for all, because he said at some point stock markets won't be at all-time highs. And on the launch date, May 19th, today, we are 20% down from the highs. But I think the point is still relevant that the stock market is not, GDP is actually a cost. It's not a benefit. And so I was trying to get that point across. But I thought these three little lenses were pretty cool. And I'm sure we could have dove in a lot more on those. So yeah, those are my comments on the script and these little clips. And we have 24 minutes left for your questions.
Excellent.
Kyle?
There's some really good ones in the chat. Nate, you mentioned CO2 a couple times in the production and climate change only really a couple of times. Given how critical climate change is, why didn't you highlight it more prominently?
Good question. Two answers. Number one, a lot of people know about climate change. A lot of people are speaking about climate change. Not too many people know about our energy, money, growth, dependence, and not too many people know about the systems, ecology, nature. The second reason is that climate change isn't the problem. Climate change is a symptom of the problem. The symptom of the problem, which is overshoot, which is we have 8 billion humans consuming a bolus of fossil sunlight that has been, all we had to do was pay for the cost of extraction. We need systems change, not climate change. But the third reason is this, and I'll just be very blunt. After I die sometime this century, or before I die, the thing I care about most in the world is the ecosystems of this earth and the 10 million species we share this planet with, and the viability of future beings, because this is a lonely spaceship floating in space. And of all the complex life in the universe, it is all here that we're aware of. And most of the species of complex life are in the oceans, which are basically the garbage dumps for our waste streams of the human economy. So I would say that climate change and the related risk associated with are many orders of magnitude the largest risks that we face this century. Having said that, I don't think they're in the top 5 in the next decade. I think we have a great simplification where the flow chart of how the future fits together is, if central banks can do this, if some new technology, if we can continue to grow, then we have these impacts. Any one of these things that doesn't allow us to continue to grow, we have a massive recalibration financially, and that's going to change our political situation. It's going to change our international supply chains. It's going to change our civic relationships. And so I don't personally think there's anything that we can do to keep carbon in the ground as a social, political activist. So I want to prepare. I want to do two things. I want to prepare society for what's coming, and I want to educate and inspire a new form of cultural consciousness awakening, that this is not what humans needed to be or were destined to be. We have a lot more flexibility in our genome. And so that's why I highlighted climate change, because I really care about it, but it is not the focus of this movie. And it's something that needs to be integrated into the whole thing. We're not going to solve climate change by just switching out to renewables and keeping everything else the same. So I hope that answers your question.
Yep. The highest upvoted question in the chat is from Jared O'Connor. Thanks to everyone involved. It's really great work, is his first sentence. But after that, he asks the question of all of us, how would you recommend us share this information and talk to our friends, our family, our community about all these realities? I'm primarily asking for those of us on the Scout team and wanting to do our best to be community leaders or even just communicators to help level set our collective view of reality.
I've always been a better analyst on putting the pieces together of the constraints of our problem than I have about the solution. First of all, I don't think there is a solution. I think there's a whole lot of different things that will contribute to our future. The way that I think about it in my head is we have 3 time frames. We have triage, which is the next few years. We have transition, which is the next 10 or 15 years. And we have long term, which is kind of the next 50 years. And different things are going to be required during those different times. With those 3 horizontal, there's also 4 on the vertical scale. There's global response, there's national, there's community, and there's individual. And so okay, put a pin in that. The other thing that I've learned, first of all, I know a lot about our situation, and the more I learn, the more I know that I don't know. And that's why I'm trying to learn things in fields that I don't fully understand. I think energy, ecology, and human behavior are the core, but there's a lot of other aspects that come into play. But one thing that I have learned is over 20 years of doing this, I have a pretty good measure of the general responses to this message. Now, it is changing because the world is changing. But some people, like many of you on this call, this like makes sense to them. It calls to them. It's clear to them. It's like, well, yeah, duh. That makes so much sense. What can I do? And they want to roll up their sleeves and get involved. There are people that are going to watch this movie, and I've already gotten some feedback to this extent. They are paralyzed when they see this, even this movie. It's so dark and fearful that they're frozen. So there are a wide disparity of political opinions and worldviews and expertise of people in the world, but there's also a wide disparity of temperament and personalities and psychological fortitude. And I, to this day, have not figured out the formula for that, which is one reason why I started this podcast and I made this video, is as a beacon to you all who are on this call tonight, that we need to start talking to each other and branching out. And I think your question is central. And the other thing I've noticed is there's a trade-off between being accurate and being helpful. Find common ground with people. And there have to be things that you agree on, and then you take a little step in a more difficult direction at a time. I do think there is a huge risk, though, that telling a story like this, and I'm kind of jumping all over the place, Jared, here, but there is a big risk that not only polarization is an issue with our political body and on social media, but polarization is a huge issue on this topic, on systems ecology, resource depletion, climate change, because 2 things are happening. Number one, we are a tribal species. We want to do and say what our group and our friends do and say. And number 2, the human brain hates dissonance. And so people out there that resolve dissonance with a story, technology will save us. There's near-term human extinction. There's nothing we can do about it. Those things are functionally equivalent because they resolve dissonance in the brain. And this story gives dissonance in the brain. And so it will never be a super popular thing because there are no clear paths and there's clear answers. There's only directions of where to go. Long-winded answer. I've been doing this for 20 years. I still don't know how to have this conversation with more people other than what's happening in Ukraine and Russia right now is going to make our population a lot less energy blind. What's happening with climate change and fires and pine die-offs and other things, and what's happening in Sri Lanka, people are going to start waking up pretty soon to this stuff. And I think we have to have metaphorical rocks in the river in communities. We have to meet the future halfway. The single biggest thing we can do is create social networks, link up people talking to each other, and the people don't have to have all the answers. They just have to understand how the things fit together. And the major implication of the Great Simplification, will unfold over centuries. But I think what happens this decade is a 30% drop in our standards of living. And whether that will be across the board or whether that will be unevenly distributed is still an open question. But imagine yourself living with 30% less money, and to maybe practice that once in a while. Boy, I'm like giving a homily here to your question.
There at the end of each one of your Great Simplification podcasts, we're going to turn the tables on you, Nate. What are you most fearful of and hopeful for in the face of our future?
Yeah, I kind of like doing that on my podcast.
To others.
Well, because everyone has such different answers. And I want to make this not only about the scientific facts of our situation, but also the humanity. So worried about nuclear war in the next decade. It almost seems inevitable to me that something is going to happen. The hubris and just our tribal us versus them, and just the gaming of it all. That's what I'm most worried about. And I don't know what to do about it. I've had Chuck Watson on my podcast a couple times. If you all haven't listened to the latest one on Chuck, it's intense, but I would recommend it. I think nuclear war would be my biggest risk in the next decade. The other one that's right up there is polarization. And because I'm a scientist and I'm a teacher, and so I like to do videos like this. I like to make presentations that use scientific facts to build a story. But if we have polarized so far because the algorithms uprate for extreme divisive hate as opposed to collaboration, collective empathy, creativity, etc., we're optimizing for the wrong things. And this isn't anyone's fault. This too is an emergent property of our system. But I really worry that if we can't have discussions, because everyone is so tribal, it's something that I've really tried to do the last 5 years or so. Is I have my own political views. I have my views about what I care the most about, which is the natural world. But I try and suppress that and listen to other people and get their opinion. And so I'm trying to not be political on any of this stuff, even though my politics is probably implied. But we need to be able to talk to each other. As far as what I'm hopeful for, I'm hopeful for emergence on something that we just can't imagine right now that bubbles up in our society. I'm hopeful for the response from young people, especially that I see from my students, who understand this, and they don't need all this wealth and trappings and stuff to be happy. And they already see that. So I think we could have a significantly smaller throughput economy. And actually a lot of people, assuming we navigate the roller coaster between now and then, could be happier and healthier in such an environment. I have a deep hope in the human spirit. And those of you that are on this call tonight I don't know all of you, but I recognize many of the names are an embodiment of that. It's almost like we had to experience the last 200 years, and we had to experience this Las Vegas smorgasbord of dopamine and Amazon trucks and Netflix and chill and all that, to realize where we came from and what we're doing and what we're capable of. And I think it's a long shot, but it's always been a long shot that small groups of humans can change the future. And I don't think I'm not naive enough to think that we're going to have some ecological kumbaya moment, but I think people deep down feel what's happening. And I think there's a lot more people in every city and every town that are good people, and they feel the wrongness of the direction we're headed. On the ecology front, babies and toddlers don't have Amazon and Walmart stickers on their walls. They have giraffes and whales and elephants. And we've kind of lost our tether to nature. And we're so rich that we've lost our tether to the social nature of our communities and people. And we're going to need people again. So there's 8 billion of us, and that is a problem with a finite resource. But I do ultimately have hope in the human spirit. And we have kicked the cans. Thomas Malthus didn't know about fossil fuels. Paul Ehrlich didn't know about debt and globalization. Then we hit the 2009 financial crisis. Central banks took over. We're running out of cans to kick. And I think the next can is not a physical one or a technological one. It's in our brains. It's in our minds. So a cultural change in consciousness is possible. And I'm trying to play a role in that. And I hope you all do too.
What do you see as the direction of the organization as well as your own work over the next few years? Like, do you want to break it into that 18-month versus transition versus something like that?
I don't want to do this, but I recognize the critical necessity of informing politicians about what's coming. And so I think someone needs to have this advanced policy initiative. And I've got very high level contacts in DC, but they're so busy, and they're playing whack-a-mole every day, and that needs serious funding and serious organization. But here's why I know it's central, because when you talk to these former senators and governors one-on-one, they don't disagree with what I'm saying. It's just when they get in a group of other high-profile people, they can't say these things. So that tells me that there is a huge leverage point there that needs to be galvanized somehow. The problem is exactly what do you do? And I'm not going to talk directly on this call to that, but I have some ideas. My wider network has ideas on what we might do in such a financial recalibration. But there are no easy answers. Everything is kind of speculative. That's another thing that I'm more comfortable talking about the problem and getting more people thinking about it. That's another thing I would really like to influence is we need to change the conversations in universities. Universities are miniature superorganisms. They're optimized for endowments and research money and paying the deputy dean of student affairs 200 grand or whatever. It's not preparing young people for the future. That's no longer their objective. Our entire education system is going to have to change and should change. So I would like to tell a story like told in this video as a way that professors can shift their work a little bit in this direction, and midwife and chaperone their students' minds towards applying to these challenges more. I don't know how to do that, but that would be one thing that I think ISOF, our organization, could influence. The other thing is like I said before, some sort of a toolkit for communities, like an updated, more video credible version of Transition Town that's like 2022 instead of 2007. I think that's necessary. I have to say, I'm so freaking happy this video is done. And at the same time, I'm going to miss it, because doing creative things like this, and, I think John Michael Greer and I got in an argument 15 years ago because he talks about magic. And I'm like, dude, magic isn't real.
I remember.
He's like, are you sure?
I remember this conversation. No.
And I was like, so mad, dude, magic? But magic is just the ability that you use some phrase or do something that shifts something in another person, their perception or their understanding. And so I think doing creative visual things to tweak and alter and shift a little bit the hearts and minds of a lot more humans, that may be all a small organization can do. I am certainly no guru. I am like not a charismatic Tony Robbins sort of person. I just like being behind the scenes. And Kyle, you know me well enough. I fortunately have a huge network of really smart, influential, cool, friendly, nice scientists So I think I would like to grow the podcast so that more people can kind of sink their teeth into all the different aspects that comprise our situation.
How do we connect this community? How do we continue to build not just these relationships, but also to continue to enhance the consciousness on this and bring people together? And I know that's something you and I have talked about a lot, about how information flows, which is part of the podcast idea, but also how we build interconnected people, those social networks that are basically driving our society these days, right? I mean, that's the core thing, is what social networks are you in? How do we build one around this part, whether it's the podcast or whether it's your messaging or other, and your team has been playing a part of that. And I know Justin and I are very much on the same page with regard to how the podcast does drive that, right? You've had different guests on giving different pieces of the puzzle, and it provides this synthesis, right, for the community. But how does the community orient and build around that for their own, whether at the local level or online communities or those sorts of things? So again, that's just something that seems like it's a particularly prevalent theme in the chat, something for you to think about.
Daniel Schmachtenberger told me last week that I'm like, I don't understand why people on Facebook and Twitter aren't like responding to like some of this really good content. And he said the algorithms are downrating your stuff. And only 3% of your Facebook and Twitter followers will see your posts. I totally don't understand how all that works, but I do understand that this stuff is complex. It's threatening. It's abstract. It's in the future. Amber Heard and Johnny Depp and Beyonce are not saying these things. But I think it could be like one of these sorts of diagrams where, oh my God, all of a sudden this is like a phase shift and ecology is cool, because we weren't taught this stuff. We didn't need to. We wanted to be taught stuff and go get a job. And now the planet is full and there's a bill that's due. So that's going to change everything. I'm just kind of a Midwest systems analyst that's trying to put the pieces together. I don't have all the answers. I don't know what to do, and I don't know how to grow the movement. But I'm learning on what doesn't work. And I think the podcast and this video is a good springboard with which to think about and grow from this and change people's hearts and minds. Gratitude to my team for all the hard work and creativity that went into the creation of this. It's a documentary, but it's also a piece of art that is squarely on Elliott's shoulders with the Jumbo team. Very proud of your work, young man, and I'm happy to collaborate on this with you. And I really hope this can be shared and used at universities. And the one regret I had about this process is I kind of ran out of funding to do a social media publicist blitz.
Thank you, Nate. It's been wonderfully unique. Learned a lot. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Elliott. And thank you all for tuning in. And I'm sure we will be in touch and maybe do more of these in the future.
Spread it around.
Yeah, please do share the video.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.